Okay. So later this year, in London, not far from where the Olympic Games have just taken place, a group of athletes will be coming together to compete in a very different competition, but one which is no less fierce and which also exemplifies the Olympic motto of higher, faster, stronger. The competition I'm talking about is the World Memory Championships, where world-class memory men and women will be coming together to perform some truly astonishing feats of mental agility. To offer up just a couple of examples, the world record for memorizing a deck of cards, 21.9 seconds. Now, just imagine how hard it is to memorize the order of 52 cards, let alone to do it in less than half a minute. Just shuffling through a deck that fast. Binary digits. You guys hear me? Yeah, that's right. The world record for memorizing binary digits is a staggering 930 binary digits. That's 930 ones and zeros, memorized in only 5 minutes. Now, to me, it's astonishing to think that there are people walking among us with these kind of superhuman memory abilities. But what's even more amazing, and to my mind much more exciting, is the thought that anyone can learn to do these things. That is to say that the competitors at the World Memory Championships, they don't have any kind of special abilities or innate talents. Rather, they all use a very small set of very simple techniques. And I know that anyone can learn to do these things because, as it happens, I'm a memory athlete. And I didn't have a good memory in school, as was said before, and if you don't believe me, you can just go ask my teachers. I'm sure they'll attest to this. And yet, last year, after only a few months of training, I competed in the Australian Memory Championships, and I came second after my coach, Tans Lally, which is appropriate, I think. And after only a few months' practice, and I also set an Australian record for memorizing the order of 99 abstract shapes. Uh-oh. No, I'm just kidding. Now, when I tell people that I'm a memory athlete, the question I tend to get asked is this. Why? Why? Why on earth, in an age of smartphones, of Google, of Wikipedia, of ever-present internet access, why would I bother training my memory? And I really like this question. I really like this question because I think it goes right to the heart of the conception we have of memory and of the relationship that we think that it has to learning. And so what I'd like to do today, it's a conception of memory that I think we get from school, where we've given kind of lists to memorize, and we'd sort of do it by kind of repeating it and repeating it and repeating it and drumming it into our heads. It's a conception of memory as being a kind of dull, impersonal, and ineffective parroting. And so what I'd like to do today are two things. The first thing is to challenge and undermine that conception of memory, and offer up instead a vision of memory as something which is creative, which is personal, which is fun, and which is highly effective. And the second thing I'd like to do is, in light of this new conception of memory, I'd like to make a case. And the case that I'd like to make is that the art of memory represents a potential revolution in education, both in the obvious sense of the word and also because, as a matter of historical fact, we would be revolving back to these techniques. Because although the World Memory Championships is the most recent chapter in the history of the art of memory, like the Olympics, these techniques find their origins in ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks, in fact, the art of memory was practiced universally by thinkers of the ancient world, who recognized that creativity and focus and critical analysis was the kind of thing that could only happen in the minds of a well-trained mnemonist. Indeed, the relationship between memory and creativity is even enshrined in the mythology of the ancient Greeks. Appropriately, Mnemosyne, which is where we get our word mnemonic, the goddess of memory, was also the mother of the Muses, the Greek goddesses of creativity. The memory techniques were then adopted by early Christian monks and safe within the curriculums and cloistered walls of Christian monasteries. Try saying that 5 times really fast. Gave me a bit of a headache practicing this speech. These techniques made their way up through the Renaissance, where they formed a cornerstone of the education system and were taught alongside grammar, rhetoric, and logic. In fact, it was only with the Protestant Reformation, which sought to do away with much of the lush visual imagery of the Renaissance, including the rich mental imagery of the art of memory, that the art of memory was driven underground and replaced with the kind of rote methods of memorization that we know today. So, a quick glance at the history of memory, it becomes quite clear that these thinkers have had a conception of memory and a view of memory that is completely alien to those of us familiar only with sort of rote methods of learning. And I think the best way to kind of see why they cared about this stuff and why they saw value in these techniques is to actually do a bit of memorizing ourselves. So today, what I'd like to do, we're going to memorize the order of the planets. And this is a good case because it's something we all would have learned in school, and we probably would have learned in the traditional way of just kind of repeating and repeating and repeating and sort of held it in our heads right up until we were successfully tested on it, where we could kind of put it down along with our pencils. So what I'd like you all to do is close your eyes. And in full brain bandwidth, using all the kind of sensory energy and imagination that you can muster, just picture the following story. To begin with, picture the sun. A giant ball of incandescent plasma, bits of flame flying off, feel the warmth on your skin. And rotating around the sun is a thermometer. And as it goes around, because of the heat, it starts to rise. And as it rises, it makes that noise that kettles and thermometers make in cartoons, that whoop. And as it reaches the top, it explodes. And balls of mercury, which is of course the first planet in our solar system, tumble out across the spacescape. Next, a curtain opens in the fabric of space, and through steps Venus, the goddess of love. And in all of her beautiful, goddessly, naked glory, she strides across the spacescape and she picks up a ball of mercury, and using only the strength the goddess can muster, she hurls it high into the air. And the ball of mercury goes up and comes down, and with a crash, it lands in your backyard, which is, of course, Earth, the next planet in our solar system. At this point, your next-door neighbour comes out, and he's red-faced and angry, and he's wielding a pitchfork, and he's ready to go to war, and this is, of course, Mars, the next planet in the solar system and the god of war. Eager to keep the peace, along comes Jupiter, the giant, wearing shiny shoulder pauldrons and carrying a big shield and a big sword. And standing in stark contrast to his regal and godlike armour, he's wearing this really tacky tourist t-shirt. And emblazoned across the chest of his t-shirt are 3 letters, S, U, and N, which of course spells sun, but is also the letters for the next 3 planets in our solar system, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And up on Jupiter's shoulder is sitting Mickey Mouse's best mate, the cartoon dog, Pluto. And of course, some of you may be thinking to yourself, hang on, Pluto's not a planet. Well, this is my memory story, so suck it up. Okay, so now everyone open your eyes. And I want you to see if you can offer up to yourselves the order of the planets. But I don't just want to see if you can do it forwards, I want you to see if you can do it backwards. Because it's one thing to know something well enough that you can go through it in the sequence it was presented to you. It's another thing altogether to know it well enough to go backwards. Now, if you can do this, and I suspect that most of you can, well done. You've just learnt in just over a minute a list which, had you tried to learn in the old-fashioned way of just repeating it to yourself, would have elicited groans of resentment from you, I'm sure, if I just said, all right, we're just going to repeat this and repeat this. And what's more, it would have taken you substantially longer. So using a technique that you've had previously no experience with, you've now outperformed yourselves using the rote learning methods that you spent 12 years perfecting at school. Now, how's that for an idea worth spreading? What's more, the experience is one that's fun. It's full of energy. And I imagine that each of you would have had very different mental stories if I were to ask you for particular details. Some of you would have maybe emphasized Venus in her nakedness. others maybe other aspects. And in fact, if you'd come up with your own images for the planets, they would have been completely different once again. Now, a little practice with these techniques, and it becomes clear that these techniques can really transform our relationship to learning. So my coach was mentioned before, Tanzil Ali. He used his techniques to teach himself 6 months of Chinese in only 3 weeks. Now, how would your relationship to learning change if all the things that you ever wanted to learn but never thought you could suddenly became possible? If you could learn a language in weeks instead of years. Now, given the criticisms that we level at our schools today, that they kill creativity, that based as they are on an industrial model, they are insensitive to the differences between our kids, the different interests and aptitudes, that they do nothing to inspire in our kids a love of learning, and very rarely even the capacity to learn. I think that it's time for the art of memory to make a return to our classrooms. And of course, learning is not just about memorizing. Of course it's not. It's about being able to retrieve information, to critically assess it, to analyze it, to synthesize it. But none of these things can occur unless you have that information at your fingertips and unless you can see how it fits into a bigger picture. And that can't be done unless that information is stored in your memory. And so, given that this is the case, I think that these techniques, which have for so long been a cornerstone of education, should make a return to our classrooms. Thank you.